1199 to order with Senator Schultz and Senator Yoakum and myself present. I do want to remind everybody that at 3 o'clock there's a state government committee, so we have 30 minutes to hear from Iowans, hear from senators about this bill. And I want to first start off with SSB 1199. This bill addresses conduct of elections, specifically on election misconduct, nomination requirements, absentee ballot voting, voter list maintenance requirements, and election enforcement and authority. Who would like to speak first on this? Senator Yoakum?
Considering there's 65 participants, I think we should let the public speak, but thank you for the offer.
Okay, Senator Schultz.
Just glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to hearing public input.
Okay, thank you. If you'd like to speak, go to the reaction and please virtually raise your hand. And I will start with Andy Conlin.
Thank you, Senator Smith, and I want to thank you and Senator Schultz and Senator Yoakum for your time this afternoon. My name is Andy Conlin. I'm here on behalf of the Opportunity Solutions Project, which is a nonpartisan nonprofit organization that develops state and federal policy solutions to help more people achieve the American dream. We appreciate you bringing this bill forward. We believe that by bringing this bill forward and advancing it through the process, the legislature is demonstrating to Iowans its commitment to high integrity, fair elections in our state. I know a lot of speakers in the call are going to discuss various provisions of the bill, but I do want to point out that we think one of the very important pieces of this bill is that it will help ensure uniformity of elections across the state. We think that both for access reasons and fairness reasons, this is a critically important piece. And again, certainly there are certainly other critically important pieces that we think are very good public policy too. So in the interest of time, I'll cut it off there, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Next up, Vicki.
Thank you. I am speaking against this bill. I thank you. I'm Vicki Aden. I live in Iowa City. Your job as legislators ought to be to make exercising our right to vote as easy as possible. You should be finding ways to encourage all Iowans to exercise their right to vote, not looking for ways to disenfranchise voters by making it difficult for them. The 2020 election was the most successful in Iowa history, with record turnout during a pandemic, in large part because of access to early mail-in voting and the steps taken by the Secretary of State and county auditors to get absentee ballot request forms to all registered voters. And all this without any widespread voter fraud. This should be celebrated, not slapped down by this legislation. This bill is unnecessary and a clear attempt to suppress voter turnout in future elections. And I think this is un-American. Thank you.
Thank you. Go with Alan Ostergren.
Thank you, Chairman Smith and Senators Schultz and Yoakum. I'm Alan Ostergren. I'm President and Chief Counsel of the Kirkwood Institute, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan public interest law firm based here in Des Moines. I think this bill does several important things to make a good election system better. It provides some good mechanisms for making sure that the voting rolls are kept up to date and accurate. It streamlines the process for that. It allows for absentee ballot participation, but also gives that in an appropriate time period to take place. This bill, in my view, does not harm the ability of anyone to vote. It provides some needed reforms to the process that will make it better. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know there's a number of people on here, so I don't want to take too much time. Thank you, Senators.
Thank you. We'll go with Jane.
There she is.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Jane Robinette, I'm a resident of Urbandale, a citizen of Iowa and a voter, and I urge you to oppose SSB 1199. Voting is fundamental to our system of government. This bill, among other things, places arbitrary limits on early voting, absentee voting, and the authority of county auditors to do their job for the voters. I, for one, would like to hear your justification for the changes proposed by this bill, particularly the reduced time periods for requesting an absentee ballot, as well as voting and returning the absentee ballot, allowing only 18 days for the auditor to send the ballot, the voter to receive it, consider it, vote it, and return it in time to be counted is just too short, especially given the postal delays we've been seeing. And instead of allowing trained volunteers who know the signature and delivery requirements and who know where the county election office is, this bill would allow only the voter, the voter's family member or household member or caretaker to return a ballot. This will deter elderly voters and other voters who lack transportation or have mobility issues or have an inconvenient schedule. Under this bill, county auditors aren't allowed to send absentee ballot request forms to voters in their county. Under this bill, county auditors aren't allowed to designate satellite voting locations unless 100 voters request a certain location. Again, what is the justification for these restrictions? Why are you wanting to make voting more difficult? I urge you to reject this anti-voting and anti-voter bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy Campbell.
Thank you, Senators. I'll try to be brief and I will send you my full comments because I know you're short on time. And this is a really big bill for only 30 minutes. I'll just say that. I represent the League of Women Voters of Iowa and the Area Agencies on Aging, both of who are opposed to this bill. There's a few things that are greatly concerning about the bill related to people that may not have access to transportation or work odd hours and aren't able to go into a county auditor's office. So first of all, the section that the shortening of the early voting period is of concern. We think it'll cause longer lines for people who might want to vote early if they want to vote at their county auditor's office. It's not unheard of that an older Iowan who is retired might take a 3-week trip to visit grandkids or go around the country. And so that shortening it to 18 days would impact that. And I do remember we shortened it from 40 days a few years ago. Second, the request period, in terms of, sorry, my notes are almost inaudible right now, but the not allowing the county auditor to send out a request form for any reason is a big concern. Individuals with disabilities or older Iowans may not have a printer to print it off at home, nor maybe they be able to have transportation or the time to go down to their county auditor's office to get that. So what I would ask that you either allow that to be requested and mailed to them, or that you create an automatic absentee voter option if somebody is routinely a person that votes absentee ballot because of a disability or age or any other reason, for work reasons. Thirdly, the ability of not having a friend or somebody else that I know be able to take my absentee ballot in for me, somebody I trust. There are nonpartisan groups like the League that are encourage voting. So this would restrict who could actually bring your absentee ballot application or absentee ballot back to the auditor's office. Also, we know that there are several satellite voting centers that are very popular. I know in Johnston, I go to my satellite voting center at the public library. It's known to the auditor to be a popular spot. I think it's unfortunate that we would take away their ability to automatically assign those satellite voting centers. And then lastly, the one question I had, I remember when we changed the law to allow postmarks or the barcode, and I don't know if there are absentee ballots that come back with just a postmark. I don't know. I'm a little concerned about that change and what the impact might be. So thank you very much for letting me speak.
Okay. Next up would be Bill.
Hi, good afternoon, Senators. I want to thank you for your time and allowing me to comment on the Senate Study Bill 1199. My name is Bill Kallested. I'm the Public Policy Manager at the Iowa Developmental Disability Council. And as advocates for people with disabilities, we currently are against the study bill in its current form. The council believes that advocates for civic participation and empowerment of the voice of people with disabilities. And specifically, our areas of concern in the bill are the narrowed timeframes of the absentee voting, prohibiting an auditor from sending an absentee ballot request to voters, the increased scrutiny in the handwriting, just to mention a few. And then we'd like to see more specific about accessibility. Amy just mentioned ballot boxes being available to people with disabilities, but also curbside voting. Additionally, there are thousands of Iowans living independently or without varied support, and they receive they receive support from a broader definition that you defined in the bill for supports. So in kind of closing, the Iowa Developmental Disability Council has seen an increase in voter turnout, and we advocate for the accessibility rules and the laws that allow people with disabilities to exercise their civic duty. So I want to thank you for your time, and we'd love to have an opportunity to speak more about those concerns. So thank you.
Thank you. Morgan. Morgan Miller.
Thank you, Senators. Morgan Miller with the Iowa State Education Association. I'll be brief, but especially now in the midst of a pandemic, we believe we should be finding ways to expand voter participation in safe and accessible ways. We feel this legislation does the opposite, specifically narrowing that window to request an absentee ballot from 120 days down to 70 days, and then narrowing the early vote window to just 18 days. And ISEA is also concerned with changing the definition of who can assist a voter with the delivery of their absentee ballots. Iowans have long relied on friends, family members, volunteers to help deliver their ballots to county auditors' offices, and making that practice a serious misdemeanor would be a drastic change from current law. So we hope you consider this and take time to really study the impact of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Myrna, we'll go with you next.
I'm Myrna Loehrlein. I live in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I have spent a number of years tracking voting bills for a project I do for a certain nonpartisan group. And I have to say, with the information I've seen over that long time period, this may be the most repressive election law in the country today. While it is unprecedented in its suppression of all voters, it clearly targets persons of low income and those who aren't exceptionally skilled in navigating our election system. Most people, especially those in direct service jobs, find it difficult to vote in person on election day. Persons of color, parents of young children, caregivers, and those not lucky enough to have access to a computer and a printer would be especially affected. The rules for listing voters are especially startling. If I decide to vote in person on election day, having almost no option to do otherwise, and heaven forbid I find myself too ill to do so on election day, from that event, my name may well be removed from the voter rolls. Try as I might, I can't think of a single group that would benefit from this law. Even party members of the proposing party would find their voting right limited almost to the point of extinction. Even voting members of the Republican Party, which had the lowest early voting number, voted early 52% of the time, and those persons would find that option severely limited. I urge the committee to think seriously about the implications of this bill and to stop its progress now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll go with Lynn. There he's moving. There he goes.
Thank you. This is Lynn Hicks from the Iowa Attorney General's office. We are registered neutral on the bill. I will limit my comments to the portions that address our office. This bill would give us authority to investigate and prosecute election misconduct. We are preparing a fiscal note on this, but I will say that we know that we do not have the current resources to do that. We don't have an investigator. We would have most likely to have hire another attorney, assistant attorney general to do this. We get currently we get very few, or we have gotten very few calls actually alleging 39A election misconduct violations. Most of the calls we get are people saying, well, what if this happens, the hypothetical. So, but we think that would change very quickly with this bill, and it would create a burden for our office. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we'll go with Laura.
Hi there. My name is Laura Hessburg. I'm with the Iowa Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Sorry, my internet is very spotty. That's why I don't have my video on. We oppose this bill, and I know a lot of people want to speak. Will concur with many of the reasons that were already stated, and just add a new one to the list. There are many victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking that can enroll in Iowa's Safe at Home program, which is a program that protects the identity of, the address confidentiality of a victim of a violent crime. The only way that the participants in this program can vote is absentee. That's just the way that it is set up. It's set up like this in many other states too. So we're very, very concerned about the shortened time frame regarding absentee voting. It would really almost make it impossible for their ballots to count, because the way the process works, and I'm not sure if most are aware of this, is that the ballot actually are sent from Des Moines, from the Secretary of State's office, and then they send that to the voter who requested it, who's a participant in the program, and then they have to send it back to, like, basically it's an added step. Then the Secretary of State's office sends it to the county, so that 18 days would basically prohibit any ballot. They already have a shortened time frame from last year, so we're very, very concerned about that. And also just anyone not, for all voters, we're concerned that this would be very onerous, especially the part of survivors of violence that are not enrolled in this program often do have someone else take up their ballot, drop it off for them, just, again, just to protect their confidentiality. We just have the same concerns that most people do about any effort to make it harder for people who can't vote in person, or that would, their safety is threatened if they do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Jamie Cashman.
Hi, Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee. I'm Jamie Cashman with the Iowa State Association of County Auditors. You should have received our comments and concerns about various provisions of this legislation, and we are registered opposed to it. I would just reserve the remaining of my comments to our president, Ryan Doctor. He's having a hand issue that he would like to be recognized to fully outline what our concerns are with this bill. Thank you.
Okay, we will look for him next here. We're scrolling through the list, so just bear with us a second. Yep. All right, we have a Sioux County, so I'm assuming that would be Ryan. So we'll go ahead and unmute him. Go ahead, Ryan.
Thank you, Senators. My name is Ryan Doctor. I'm the president of the Association of the Iowa State Association of County Auditors, and we are registering opposed to this bill. Some points that we're looking at here. The bill gives the Secretary of State broad authority for local elections, which may take away some of the local decision-making of county auditors. Next, the removal of home rule regarding elections is protected by the Iowa Constitution. So that's something that we've identified as well. The bill makes the failure to perform any election duty a crime under the code if we do not adhere to that for code chapters 39 through 53. We make mistakes at times, and the severe penalties may deter good qualified people from public service. Again, echoing some of the comments about reducing the absentee voting days. That increases staffing needs for the counties over time and also creates opportunities for mistakes. Auditors would also be forbidden to send out absentee request mailings countywide, which does help mitigate our workload for larger elections, and it helps us reduce errors in that regard. Again, the bill restricts non-family members or non-caregivers from returning ballots. The bill disallows auditors from establishing satellite voting centers, which again, this could create some lines at the polls and is a very helpful tool for larger counties. And finally, limitations on drop boxes to 1 box per county is problematic as well. It creates hardships for both large and small counties. So I thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Next up, Shannon.
Thank you, Senators. My name is Shannon Patrick. I'm a resident of Johnson County and generally a good government advocate for good governance. I'm here to speak today, first off, on the process for this, and that as best as I can tell, this bill was submitted yesterday. I am astonished and impressed with the 100 fellow Iowans who are joining on this short notice to speak about the bill, as well as that how well they've processed it. It's a pretty complicated bill. And when I was looking through it, trying to evaluate it, I just wanted to comment on the difficulty of it in that it's got a lot of changes packed in here. And the fact that this committee is happening so quickly basically creates the impression that basically you're trying to rush this bill through, which feeds the larger narrative that the GOP is the party that is trying to keep you from voting. It is an off election year. I would encourage you to take the extra time to study this bill, to solicit feedback from groups like the County Auditors Association and others, and to come back next year with a well considered bill that has gotten good public scrutiny and public commentary on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Connie.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm Connie Ryan. I'm the Executive Director of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa and Action Fund, and we oppose the legislation. I'm going to take a different tack than a lot of my colleagues who are greater experts on specifics of the bill. And I just want to talk about voting briefly. I love to vote. I'm sure that everybody on this Zoom loves to vote as well. I love to vote in person and always did that until 2020, but changed in 2020 because of the pandemic. And I always, when my kids were younger, took my kids with me. And as a result, they also love to vote and take that responsibility seriously as adults. But loving to vote is not necessarily the point today. The point is voting is a constitutional right that is central to our democracy. We are a better democracy when people vote. We are a better democracy when people feel safe and welcome in voting. We are a better democracy when our government encourages people to vote and protects that right for all people who are eligible to vote. The legislation does not encourage voting. It does not create a path for people to vote. It discourages and hinders Iowans from voting by placing unnecessary barriers in their way. Iowans in your districts will be hindered. People who are older, people who are disabled, people who work multiple jobs, people who may be traveling, people who are distracted with the business of life and children and work, people who don't have access to the same information that you and I do, people who are part of groups that have been marginalized and historically disenfranchised. The legislation sends the state of Iowa down a path of fewer people voting. Iowans who are eligible to vote being discouraged and hindered by their government. We do not understand the problem that is you are trying to solve here. Widespread voter fraud in Iowa does not exist. The Secretary of State, a Republican, has said so. The legislation will discourage Iowans from voting. There is no good that would come to our state or frankly, our democracy in putting unwarranted, unnecessary barriers in place that make it harder to vote. I love to vote, whether in person or by absentee ballot, because I believe that my vote matters. I also believe that every person who is eligible to vote, regardless of ideology or political party, I believe their right and ability to vote matters too. Government should make voting as accessible to all people who are eligible to vote. On behalf of Iowans who also believe in the right to vote and that it is the government's job to make voting accessible, I urge you to oppose the legislation. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Seeing no one else to speak from the public, I will now ask Senator Yoakum if you have any comments.
Thank you, Senator. I think that the public has made it pretty clear that we have a lot of work to do on this bill yet before it should go to full committee. I'm hoping we can do another subcommittee, quite frankly, Senator, that we can actually walk through the bill and get a better handle on why these different changes are occurring, what problem we're attempting to solve. From my read of the bill last night when I took it home, it appears to me that we are almost attempting to squeeze early voting out of existence. And a lot of Iowans, as we heard today, rely a great deal on that method of voting and have become more so reliant on it, especially during this pandemic. So I'm really trying to put my head around what problem are we solving. So I'm hoping that we hear more from you as the author of the bill, Senator. And at this point, I certainly will not be signing off on it in subcommittee. And I actually hope you'll be willing to do another meeting.
Thank you. Senator Schultz.
Well, I appreciate having the opportunity to be on the subcommittee. I believe it's the first time I've been on an election integrity bill, and I've wanted to be. So I thank everybody for being here. I think this is incredibly important. I think it is it addresses the controversy that the country is going through right now. I think myself that Iowans' votes were disenfranchised by some shady dealings in 5 cities around the country that I think shows what happens when you don't strengthen your election system, when you allow people to game elections to the point that they did in cities such as Philadelphia. So I'm happy to sign this. I think it's incredibly important. Elections are like infrastructure. You never stop working on them to make them stronger and better and more reliable.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Schultz. Thank you all for your comments today. I first want to start off by saying that there's a vast majority of this bill has been out there for a number of years where we have worked on a number of these issues. So I want to make sure that people are aware of that. This bill creates uniform election procedures across all 99 counties. It clarifies enforcement and authority. Elected leaders have to uphold state and federal election laws. Lastly, it continues to advance the integrity and security of Iowa elections. County auditors are key to Iowa's successful elections. And I thank the county auditors for the job they do out there. The vast majority of them do a wonderful job, and I appreciate the service that they give to Iowans. They provide countless hours advancing our goals. But we have to keep in mind the state cannot have a handful of auditors that obstruct those goals to the detriment of Iowa voters. Those auditors' inability to follow the law, or their belief that they have the power to create their own law, or to veto the laws that we have and have passed legally at this Capitol, has caused unnecessary confusion and wasteful spending of tax dollars in 2020. This bill brings uniformity to enforcement and enhancement penalties for those who hinder or disregard the law. The laws we pass in this Capitol will be followed by all elected officials in this state. Setting absentee voting at 18 days will limit voter remorse, the length of campaigning in the state, and allow more time for informed voting. I do want to remind the people on this call that I heard similar suggestions that this would limit voting when we went from 40 to 29 days a number of years ago. We had record turnout when it went to 40 to 29 days. Now we're going to 29 to 18 days and we're hearing the same thing. And when we pass election bills in this chamber and that become law, we get record turnout. And I do remind everybody, the average length for early voting in the United States is approximately 18, 19 days. So what we're going to in this bill puts us right near the average in the United States. So thank you for your comments today. I look forward to moving this bill through the process, and thank you all for joining us today. This concludes SSB 1199.